not even look out the windows that we look out of. That a black person could not look out the same windows that whites looked out of. And lastly, you could not have no law in some states, you could not play games with white folks. But anyhow, that was called the slave code, which says very specifically how black folk were to behave in society and how white folks were to behave. And everybody was expected to honor it. And if a white person violated it, they were just as much a risk as a black person. They called him nowadays a nigger lover. He was one out of town too. If he was in school, they called him teaching a black child. It would cost him $100 fine and 39 lashes to teach him, get caught trying to teach a black person to read because you're trying to make him equal. So that's how the laws came into effect. Now, I skipped this earlier. This is just showing you the difference between colonial slavery, which is modern slavery, and white slavery. You notice in here, churches, everybody felt some responsibility to everybody who had been enslaved except black folk. Nobody held any responsibility. We were treated totally different. So if anybody ever talk about, well, there are other people who were enslaved and they made it. Slavery was totally different from blacks than any other kind of slavery that ever been on the history of this earth. Also important for you to know is that was why. In the book, I talk about why certain people were treated differently between blacks and whites. For instance, reasons for indentured whites. Those whites went into slavery because they were constituting available slave food for blacks because whites perceived themselves as being masters. For instance, American Indians, they were not white, but they were considered heathens, but the colonists respected them. So there's a whole bunch of things, and I go through all those things in the book, and I'm going to waste your time to show you that anybody who was enslaved was totally different from blacks. They did not give you the same considerations. Also, just very quickly, I don't want to waste too much time on all this with you, is that if anybody ever asked you, all around the world, it was totally different. In global racial ordering, they set up an ordering system when they started the slavery process in the West and around the world. Like for instance, Asia, they had a system over there before the Asia. What they did there is they're hiring that scale. Remember this, the scale was this. The ordering went white, yellow, brown, and black. And everything that goes down, the value becomes less as you go down. And so the techniques they used were different. So up here, when you went into Asia, for instance, to enslave those people, you had large, complex civilization of yellow-skinned people. So the colonial powers that simply imposed a numerical small superstructure over them, which means they sent a few whites there to dominate, just a few whites to be their overseers. Now look at North America, for instance, and see that, before I get there, they were allowed, they kept letting the people keep their power. They exploited the people and the land. They allowed Asian culture, their language, and their family structure to remain intact. Now when you get down to North America, they were brown-skinned people. The colonial power confiscated their land. They killed and forced the natives into less desirable land that they call reservations. They allowed the colonial powers to exploit the land, pass the ownership of wealth to their heirs. Native American culture and heritage remained intact and were enshrined into the United States coinage. See, they respected the Indians, so on our coins, we put the Indians' heads on the coins. In our museums, we put pictures and paintings of them. As a matter of fact, the first emblem for the United States was an Indian. Before we had Uncle Sam, it was an Indian. White folk bragged about going around learning the English, learning how to speak with the Indians, learning their language. But when you got the black folk, nothing was left intact.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I just hope that you're doing super great from wherever you're watching us. Now in today's discussion, it's a video of Dr. Cloud Anderson talking to black folks of the United States, and he tells them that black people, we still don't get it. And this is how he explains. Dr. Cloud Anderson gives a lecture, Black People Still Don't Get It, which is a powerful critique on socioeconomic challenges facing black communities, and a wake-up call for self-sufficiency. His argument revolves around the idea that despite centuries of struggle, black people have yet to fully grasp the systemic nature of the oppression and take the necessary steps to build a strong economic foundation. And he goes ahead and asserts that historical injustices coupled with failure to develop collective economic power have left black people vulnerable to exploitation and economic marginalization. We know that his lecture serves as both an analysis and a blueprint for action, urging black communities to break free from cycle of dependency and take control of their own destiny. So it's more of a warning to black folks. It's more of a wake-up call to black people. And it's so important for us to, black folks of the United States, to have these discussions because they're important. And it's a wake-up call for everyone. And it makes you and gives you perspective to start thinking differently, not think the same the way you used to think. It's not that you usually think the wrong way, but according to Dr. Cloud Anderson, it feels like black people are still not doing enough to help them make them get outside the system, right? Doing enough in terms of economic, in terms of supporting black people, in terms of trusting each people. Because for the longest time, we've been having folks not trusting folks, especially black people, not trusting black people. Asking yourself why black people take their money outside to other community and don't support the black community. Amongst those discussions are the key things that Dr. Cloud Anderson talks about. Now, I want us to watch this video. I hope you really find and grade from wherever you're watching us from. These are presenter Jintek Stories, and I'll be back with my commentary. Until then, thank you guys for watching my videos. Thank you for those who are subbing. Thank you for those who are supporting me through my Cash App account, which is on my bio. Thank you for those who are sending me super thanks. I'm really, really appreciative. But until then, I want us to watch the video, and then I'll be back. We'll have a discussion in regards to this.
You found blacks, when they colonized them, they imposed total control over them and colonized them. They exploited their land and their people and their resources for centuries. And they executed mass displacement of the people by shooting them around the world into slavery. They took their wealth from them, and also they destroyed their families, they destroyed their culture, and destroyed their history. And they didn't identify with anything. So what I'm saying, so even though people say, well, they invaded China, they invaded this, they did not do it the same way. The further you go down the line, and skin color, the more severe everything has been, and depressing and exploiting. Now you find, now who's doing all this, all exploiting? These are the countries that were involved in the exploitation of black folks, major slave traders. It was England, France, Dutch, Spain, Portuguese, and Arab nations. And I want to call something to your attention here. The harshest people in exploiting black folk and enslaving black folk were the English. And now watch this skin color. Watch how the color gradations go down. Watch these gradations. Now, English, where it was white at the top, they were the hardest against black folk. France, again, white, they were the second hardest. Dutch, again, white, they were third hardest. Spain, the color begins to get a little darker. They were not as bad, they were swarthy color. Portugal, again, not as bad, swarthy color. Arabs, again, were the milder in treating, in how they treated blacks. But they were the darker. So even though the Arabs were enslaving blacks, they were much easier on blacks than all the others in the treatment. But over here, it reversed itself. In terms of who was in slavery the longest, those who were the hardest was in it for the shortest period of time. And it goes down again. Whites were in it shorter than anyone that are darker. The Arabs, who were so mild against black folk, have been in it the longest. They've been in it now for 1,300 years and still doing it. So all that I thought you might be interested in knowing who's doing the slavery, who's getting it, and how it's being controlled based on skin color. And, yes. Yes, yes. And all this information I'm trying to give you all just background information so we can get into real media discussions in a few minutes.
Okay.
Ask anything you want. And but this is just based on research I'm trying to give you my understanding of how the game is being played. So the slaves, now in 1705, it says slave codes went into existence across the country, which told white folk, white ministers, white institutions, white governments how they were to act with black folk, and told black folk how they would act. In 1710, something here happened that's very unique for you. You have to remember this. In 1710, people said, look, we got so many blacks coming into the country, and we set up a system on controlling them. but how do we control them internally? So in 1710, the state of Virginia passed something that's very important. They enacted what they call Meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission went into effect in 1710. And what it says is this, that any black person who invents something that a white person can use to make money off of, any black person who saves a white man's life, or any black person who saves a white man's property, or any black man who informs on any kind of thing that can be a potential threat to white people, can receive his freedom, can receive public recognition, and money. Okay? So that started in 7. That was called Meritorious manumission. That went in effect. Now what I did then, that's called official crafting. That system has never been applied based on my understanding of human behavior and anthropology against any people except black folk, where you officially reward somebody for doing it in their own people. You hear what I'm telling you now? That started. So now I went and tracked down 150 possible insurrections of slaves, slave revolts. And a black person squealed in every one of them. Whether I don't care if it was Nat Turner or all of them. A black person squealed. As a matter of fact, in Harper's Ferry, the night John Brown came in town to free the slaves, there was a black guy sitting on the porch at the hotel. His name was, I'll give you his name, you don't know, his name was Haywood Shepherd. He saw John Brown and his group coming in, spotted him, and ran out the street to try to get his manumission. And they shot him dead in the streets. Was he going to alert the whites that John Brown and his group was there, and that shot did still alert the town. And that's how John Brown got captured in that firehouse, and he had a bunch of blacks with him, they all got killed and hanged, okay? And because they caught him by just killing Haywood Shepherd, they erected a monument to Haywood Shepherd in Harper's Ferry. It's still there. If you ever go to Harper's Ferry, and I'm going to tell y'all where to find it, because whites have got slick now, they get it. If you go down to Harper's Ferry and find an old hotel, and the town is still, it's a monument now. It's right beside the house. They got a big brown box over it. And pull that box back and take a picture of it. And look and read the inscription on it. It says, "This is the kind of nigga we like." And they talk about it. His name was Haywood Shepherd, and that he gave his life for the cause. So take that picture of it, and you can move the box, but I guarantee that is the only monument to a Sambo in this country. The only monument. So if you ever get a chance to get a picture of it, and I don't know how much longer it'll be that they find out. I'm telling you all, they might even destroy it. But go down there. So take a picture of that, okay? But that became the official system in this country, and it's still operative today. And I can take you right now to Washington, D.C. You still see people doing it. They may be sitting on the Supreme Court. They might be on television. Okay? But they're still being rewarded, recognized, and getting compensation at the expense of their own people. Okay? And that's why later on we start talking about the difference between a Sambo and Uncle Tom. I explain all this to you. And I just thought, and on this chart, I started to give you some indications of all some of them were exposed. The blacks tried to vote in New York, they were exposed. The slaves voted in Maryland, they were exposed. And I tried to vote 150 of them. And everyone, not one single one, got away without being exposed. And some black got free, got recognition through meritorious manumission. Okay? But let me get to this point. Right around this point, something else began to happen too. Around 1750, black population in this country hit about 34% national. It was very important. Population went to 34%. And that began to scare whites in this country. And so the whites in this country started sending messages. First of all, they organized, called themselves the Continental Congress. You read about this in history book, they don't tell why. They began to send letters back to England and said, look, stop sending the slaves over here. We're scared to death. We got 34% now as blacks all over the country. And in the South, they were up to 55 to 65%. And whites are scared to death. And England said, no, we got a good thing going. Because they had a franchising system. You know what's system about franchising with McDonald's, Burger King? England started the franchising system. So I told you about the factories and capitalism. Now franchising also came out of slavery. And what England was doing, England was saying, if you go over to the United States, I'll give you free land. And just like Burger King and McDonald's send you the straws and napkins and the containers, they said, we give you the land, we send you the slaves, we'll send you the protection, we'll send you the seeds, and everything you produce, you send it back to us. We'll process it and send it back to you. So the franchise, that's where the franchising system came from, just like capitalism and everything else, shipping blacks. So now, if England's franchising some of the blacks into the United States, the whites got scared. They said, we want to get out of this. Not only do we want to get out of too many blacks, but we want to get out of the franchising system. We don't want you to keep taking our products and we have to buy them back from you. We had these blacks pick all this cotton and send it to you, and in England, you make it into cloth, we buy the cloth back. See what I'm saying? And so that's what's created what we call the Revolutionary War. But they don't tell you that's what created the Revolutionary War. Those are the factors. They wanted to get out of having all the products that black folk were picking going to England, and they have to buy it back from them. What blacks were picking, all the indigo, rice, sugar, rum, cotton, tobacco, everything. As a matter of fact, at that point in time, blacks were producing almost 100% of all the sugar on earth, almost 100% of all the cotton. Because at this point in time, people were all wearing wool. There was no such thing as cotton cloth, fabrics, textile. And then so blacks were shipping off so much stuff into England that England was getting so fat and sassy that it created what we call an industrial revolution in England. You read about the industrial revolution in England, they don't ever tell you that what created the industrial revolution in England that they take credit for was black products being sent to them. And they were manufacturing and processing and selling it back to this country at an add-on price and add-on value. So that created, so they were scared to death of all those blacks in this country. So as soon as the Revolutionary War was over, the first act of the United States Congress was to do what? Pass a law that says what? No more Negroes come to this country unless you are a slave. So the first act of Congress in 1790, after the Revolutionary War, it was put a ceiling on black folk. They said, this is a white country, no more unless you come in as a slave. And furthermore, that they wanted to end slavery, period. But the rich plantation owners say, well, look, I've invested a lot of money into these blacks. I got to get my money out of it. So the United States Congress says, well, then let's close out slavery in 25 years. So by the year 1808, let's everybody kill off international slave trade. That's why that's kill off international slave trade. So in 1790, they passed the first immigration law that says it's a white country, zero quota of blacks. That's why you can't get Haitians in. We'll get to that. Okay? So they put a zero quota on black folk. And they also passed the second act which says we also, every 10 years, we want a census taken. So we know how many blacks are in the country. We know it's what you're trying to trick us or raise over that number. Okay? So now by 1805, let's create another thing now. Up to this point in time, most of the slaves coming to the United States were 68 to 70% were black men. Very important for all my sisters when we get into this feminism. I tell you, it was primarily black men. So the people that were carrying the burden of slavery was not black women, contrary to what I'm fighting my sisters on TV about this all the time. It was not black women. White people in this country did not need black women. They didn't need you. Now someone say, well, they needed us to go to bed with. No, they didn't need you. They had all the white women in they needed to go to bed with. What they wanted was the biggest, burliest, blackest man they could get, so they worked to death before he was 40 years of age. Because there was no retirement plan for him, no Social Security. They just wanted him dead. They did not want him to go into old age. The worst thing that could happen to a white man was having an old black man. They didn't need you. Now listen what I'm saying. They didn't need you. They wanted you dead by a certain age. And they got this whole term saying, well, instead of a black, that's why they got this thing about a lazy slave. It's this nigga not working hard, I'm dying fast enough for me. Now see, but there's never, and common sense was said, what's the incentive for having a hard-working slave? And I was on a television show, not really television, a radio show with Tom Sullivan, that group up in Michigan. He was screaming about, black slaves were lazy. He was supposed to be lazy. But the conservatives saying, well, blacks didn't do that much, they were lazy. And they also going around saying now, well, blacks have learned poor work habits. And the reason we're not successful in this country now in business is because we developed poor working habits in slavery. We learned how to lean on the shelf. We needed to faint illnesses, pretend we were sick. Now, that's what some of the black conservatives are saying around the country tell you. They're saying that's why you're all in your troubles, because you're lazy and don't have a good work habit. And I always say to them on TV, why would not people want to be good, hard-working slaves? I mean, they might not be the smartest people in the world, but they ain't dumb. Let's get black trans in some sense, you know. Even though you got laws that I'm not going to educate you, but at least pretend we got some sense, you know. And I congratulate those black slaves. They should have pretended they were sick. But anyhow, without black conservatives trying to criticize them, but anyhow. Okay, now about this point, that's when Northern segregation began anyway. There were a few blacks that were not enslaved at that point in time for various reasons. So some of those blacks tried to get real slick at this point. So some of them jumped up and said, well, you know, we had some black conservatives in those days too. You know, all those I told you they got free from Meritorious manumission. I remember I told you that. Now they were free. They said, well, I've been Meritorious manumission now. So first I'm going to get me some slaves too. So they jumped up and tried to get slaves. We had about that time about 450 blacks in North Carolina. We got the Meritorious manumission, had some slaves. And so all of a sudden white folks said, hold on, you can't do that. And they said, what do you mean we can't do that? He said, no. See, because if you do that, you violate that public policy where you're supposed to be supported. See, you cannot own slaves when you're a slave. Because then you come up, you equate yourself to me. And I as the master. That's right. So those blacks, so Delaware passed, I might not have it on there, but Delaware passed the first law saying no black person can own a slave. Because see, if you own a slave, you've elevated yourself in status. Remember I told you about the public policy in 1638, saying a black must always be supported. So a few blacks, those meritorious, manumitted black folk tried to get slick and get them some slaves. But it didn't work, and they shot that down real fast. See, I gotta go a little fast because I can't lose you all. I'm gonna get through all this stuff. Now to get out, keep our people in line, they set up a system. They said, now we got all these blacks, but to get the maximum use out of it, you get the training period. So they set up a system called seasoning black folk. So they sent black folk out of Africa. They didn't just send you right into the United States into a slave field. What they did, they sent you into the islands, the Caribbean, for 6 months to be seasoned. That means to be whipped and taught, to be broken like a wild horse. Now you bring a wild horse, you're going to break it in, train it. You go buy a dog, you got a few, you got somebody to break to learn how to go to the bathroom and take them outside. So most of the blacks had to go into the Caribbean to be seasoned. And now let me tell you that typically, just for your monetary interest, when blacks are being brought to those factories on the West Coast, whites are paying on the average of about $25 to $35 a head for any black that was being sold out of Africa. But they set up a system called compounded interest that you also find in business. So what they wanted a 15% return on their money. So they got in this country, they would typically sell those blacks for about $400 to $450 a piece. Okay? So I want to give you some facts, you know what kind of money they're making off of it. Now, when they got into those islands, they had a process like this. They teach them how to break it like a wild horse. And these are the things they wanted for them. First of all, I want this black to be taught discipline, okay? And so what they would do is subject you to endless, hard, tedious, dirty work. They want you to be inferior to whites. So they set the system about never seeing any black with power in an authoritative position. Nobody could do that. And if somebody came around to try it, if you did this, another white person would shoot you as a white person because that threatened his system. See, if he has 200 slaves somewhere by himself, and he saw you with your slave being in charge, he thought that his slaves would get arrogant and up. And they could not. Thank you. No role models. So you could have the role models. And so they set the system of never seeing a black with any power and anything that tends to suggest to another black person that he can be something special or be other than what they want you to be. So then they taught you to know your place. That was the whole thing about the color line and Jim Crow followed that. To be backward and childlike, they plan you to ignorance and humiliation. They always humiliate you. They told that you were childlike. That's why they always call you boy. They wouldn't give you a title. All this kind of stuff. I'm not going to bless your intelligence with all this, but they set up a religious system called the seasoning process. Yes, sir.
Isn't that what they do at Haiti? Put down to Haiti and West Coast?
Yes, right.
Down to Haiti.
Right.
And then West Coast, they went to Haiti. And it's a group that stayed in Haiti.
Right. That's what happened. They would take you down in the islands and they would treat you and season you and break you in. So when you come in this country, they would sell you on the market as being a treated and seasoned black. And they would put out a little advertisement about what all you could do. You know, if you could speak the language and you know left and right, you know a few words, then you sold at a head for a higher value. Yes, yes, sir.
How successful would you say that system really was in terms of percentages, 50% of the slaves, 20% of the slaves? Because you had all these rebellions, and it's obvious today that it's not totally effective.
No, it wasn't. There were some blacks who just didn't go for the open door. Some of them still trying to get out of it. But one of the things I should tell you that, contrary to what you're being taught, just about the Underground Railroad, going north, blacks going north, going to Canada, a lot of that's BS too. Black don't work that dumb. Because see, blacks in the South, most of the mountains easy to go around Florida, go to Spanish territory, about walking 50 miles across the road. I keep running my friends with stories. See, they keep running the game. I want to tell them, I said, why y'all put BS in my phone? Every black one on the Underground Railroad heading north. They got to BS. What? Black folks began working educated, they weren't dumb. See, most of them say, I can leave in Alabama, go right into Florida, Florida's a Spanish territory. I can go right across and nobody come out of the country. Why would I walk 1,000 miles to get to Canada if I walk across the road to be in Florida? But everybody go look at the Black History course, you got the Underground Railroad heading north. I said, black people are crazy, you see? I what was fun. But the reason that's important, I'm reminded that not because I came from Florida, but because I want you to understand how we got into Seminole Wars and how Florida came in as a territory. Contrary to what people, they never put in the history book, you can talk about the Seminole Wars, the Great Seminole Wars. The Seminole Wars came because black slaves were running off into Florida, and they were intermingling with the Indians and been placed in prominent positions. And that whites couldn't stand it. And they wanted those slaves back. And the worst thing, again, as the Reverend said, you were creating role models for slaves by letting those blacks run off into Florida and be role models for Indians. They were interpreters, they were scouts, they were chiefs. And that was what triggered the 3 Seminole Wars in this country. As a matter of fact, that's how Jacksonville came into existence. They kept sending Stonewall Jackson to bring those slaves back. He went down to Jacksonville and burned up the fort and killed about 200 women and children in Jacksonville. And he named Jacksonville after him. We had Fort Negro down in the Chattahoochee River. He also destroyed a fort there, shot one ball into a fort, and killed a whole bunch of women and kids because the men would always leave. But we had some very prominent blacks involved in Florida. One of the biggest ones I told you about was John Horse. I mentioned somebody. John Horse was one of the baddest blacks that lived in this country. Forget about Martin Luther King, forget about Malcolm X, forget about Du Bois. The baddest black that lived in this country was a black man named John Horse. He was in Florida. He kicked this country's posterior for 50 years. And they never caught him. Never caught him and never killed him. And he was a chief and he led the black, he was one of the scouts that led him. You hear about the Trail of Tears where they marched all the Indians out of Florida after Cherokee territory. They tell you that was led by a black man named John Horse. He took his people and he carried a bunch with him. He was the chief, second person to Osceola. Osceola was the Seminole Indian chief. And they imprisoned Osceola because he was trying to get his wife back. His wife was married to a black woman named Morning Dew. Morning Dew was a black woman, that was his wife. They kidnapped her. And he went in, and then what triggered the 3rd Seminole War, he went to get her back. And under a flag of truce, they caught him and stuck him in a prison called in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and stuck him in a damp cold cell. He finally died of pneumonia and an explosion. And with it, he had about 30 or 40 blacks with him at that time. They also killed him. So he never got anyone to do back. That left John Horse, another black man named Wildcat, an Indian named Wildcat. They went all over the West, fighting and killing whites. They finally went to Mexico a couple times and came back out. They finally killed Wildcat out in Texas. They never caught John Horse. Last time they heard him, he rolled off in the South and never saw him again. That was the baddest black that ever lived in this country. As the only black that ever took this country home, fist to fist, toe to toe without the rhetoric, this fault, they never got it. Okay? So there are evidence of black folks that did what they're supposed to do and got away with it. And you can talk about all the other black heroes. I don't call them heroes, call them naked. They're dead. This one, they never caught him and never beat him. Okay? So, but anyhow, but that triggered the Seminole War, and because of the Seminole Wars, that's how we got Florida. Because we ran Spain out and took it over. But Florida came into the Union because the Indians and blacks kept getting together in that state, and they were trying to get the slaves back. But let me mention one point about the Indians, because there's another myth floating around about Indians were worse treated than blacks. Don't believe it. BS again. The worst people that have been treated, as I told you, that global distribution scale, based on skin color of black folks. See, Indians are browns in here. They're older blacks. Blacks are the worst treated. I.e., as an example, Indians, where I found that the biggest killers of black slaves were Indians. Because they knew very quickly, the Indians weren't dumb either, that the only unarmed people in the United States were who? Black folks. I would look at the 20-year period, seeing just gauge what whites were doing versus Indians. Indians were the biggest slaughters of black folks. What they would do, the whites would put the blacks out in the field, work the field all through the day. Every time an Indian attack came, guess who was exposed? They had blacks with burglar alarms. Let me give you some little piece of information about Indians so you don't buy the garbage. I leave you all there. I don't believe in the BS anymore. Also, Indians were the primary hunters of black folk. Every time they caught a black runaway slave, they picked up $20 for it. Track him down and bring him back to his master. $20 a head. Also, I want you to know that out of the 6 so-called civilized Indian tribes in the United States, all of them were slaveholders. Every one of them were held slaves, sold slaves, and captured slaves. All were slaveholders. And even more important, last I want you to know, that all 6 civilized tribes fought on the side of the South to maintain slavery. Now you remember all that, okay? So you start thinking about, well, poets. Indians had more advantage than you did. And in addition to that, they were treated better. Where on one hand, Indians, every Indian in the United States was treated as a non-citizen, just like black non-citizens. Both were non-citizens. But as non-citizens, Indians got land. They could hold land or they were given reservations. Okay? 2, Indians could get free medical care. 3, Indians got free seeds and tools. 4, Indians got free schooling. Not only did Indians get free schooling, Indians were required to go to school by law. On the other hand, with black folk, it was against the law for you to be caught getting an education. It was against the law for you to own land. It was against the law for you to have a weapon. It was against the law for you to protect yourself. This is what I'm telling you now. And also, those Indians, again, were brought into the system. They were brought into the system for a very specific reason, because they did not want the Indians to identify with black folk. This thing, which you're going to find the same thing is going on today. This group will all lumped together to make sure whites are never in the minority. Because back then, you passed the Revolutionary War, they passed the public policy says, in a democracy, the majority wins and the minority loses. Remember that. The majority wins and the minority loses. So the whites say, if we ever dare come into a minority status, we're going to immediately incorporate some of these people going down the sheet to make sure we never get in the minority. Okay? That's what we start talking about here. Now get over here, for instance, I start talking about populations. Whites always manipulate the populations to make sure they're always the majority, so they're always the winner. They always make sure that you're always the loser by being the minority. And later I'm going to tell you, never let anybody call you a minority. Because you are the only planned permanent minority in this country. That makes you the only planned permanent loser. You can never win the way it's structured. Unless you get into a majority status someplace. And later on we start talking about some of these things that relate to today. You always struggle to get into the majority. And when you get into the majority, always say, I am the majority and I'm now the winner. And that's why we can't win in Detroit, Michigan, St. Louis, Newark, Washington, D.C., where blacks make up a major population. Because they don't understand this. And they got you locked in. You don't know how to play the game. I go to Detroit, Michigan. They got an 84% black population, a black mayor, a black city council. I said, what are you doing for black folk? Help them start business, get money. He said, well, we got an office of minority business. I said, how in the world can we have an office of minority business and the city's 84% black? And I go downstairs to find out that in the contracts and services of goods, that whites are getting 96%. Same thing in Washington, D.C., and every other black city. Because you got locked into the mindset of being a minority. You're so enamored with being a minority that you believe that even when you become a majority, you cannot shift gears and say, I'm not a majority. And I go all over this country and I can't even find a black person that would even stand up and say, I represent black people. I don't represent minorities, I represent black people. I go to the United States Congress, Black Congress, we're friends now, a lot of them belong down Institute now. I said, why don't you just stand up for black people? They said, well, you know, we can't do it. We got to have support of women and Asian and Hispanic. Now, I'm telling you, the only one the most vigorous one I found supports black people was Alcee Casey. He said, put me on your board. He said, I don't give a damn. I go to the NAACP. We got three organizations in the United States. It's going to be looking out for black folk. I go look at their mandate and they say, well, we got to look out for minorities and women and abused children, wives. Wait a minute, hold it. So, make a bottom line, we don't have anybody about black folk. The worst thing is that even our minorities say, yeah, we're going to look out for black folk, doctor. We totally agree with you. I said, fine. We're going to look out for black folk with a sub group. That's what's up. We're going to look out for black women. Or we're going to look out for black children. I said, wait a minute. Why don't you simply look out for black folk? Because they're scared to stand up and look out for black folks. And they said, well, we're going to look. So right now, the whole movement in this country now is to be concerned about black children. And I tell them to me, I'm against it. I'm not interested in black children. Like, you know why? I'm interested in black adults. If I say the adults, let them say their own children. That's right. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to place and go, well, we got to set these programs to save the children. No, don't save the children, save the parents. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Isn't there a law that says black men are supposed to be kept in a certain realm?
Yes, but see, because it's built into your structure. It's built into your structure that it won't come out say necessarily explicitly, but the entire issue of racism is territorial items between males. That's what you're fighting for. Every male wants to be able to practice territorial items, meaning protect his own turf, protect his own cave, protect his own lair, like an animal. The white male here, okay, they got a ranking order. See, whites love ranking orders. We're going to talk a lot about that if I get enough time this morning to do it. They love ranking orders. White female was based on the tapestry. That's called Southern culture, Southern chivalry. That's why you always hear the Klan, all the white organizations protect white woman do it. That's why between the years of 1882 and 1892, they lynched 2,800 black men. And all of them had something to do with being in a white woman's presence, coming to the door when a white man was home, not taking off your hat, blinking, looking at her, staring, shaking hands with her, touching her, being too close to her. So that's because she's in a protected category. She is like precious china. She's to be protected at all costs. Go to read in your white racist articles. This is what they're after. Protect the white woman. Now, the white man put himself on the level where he is equal to any woman because he wanted direct, immediate access to her. I don't care if it's an Indian woman or a black woman. He wants to be able to go to bed with her and do anything he wants to do. So he wants her, but he wants a white woman up above in place and protect him.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I just hope that you're great. I just hope that you managed to see all these things that were happening. First of all, one of the key themes that in Dr. Cloud Anderson lecture is the idea that racism is fundamentally economic. He argues that race was created as a tool to justify economic exploitation, particularly in the context of slavery. Remember, white elites structured the American economy in a way that ensured that black people remained at the bottom, both legally and socially. Dr. Anderson critiques the failure of black communities to recognize that power, economic power, is the primary tool for liberation. Right? He states that political and social advancements meant little if they are not backed by financial independence. According to Dr. Cloud Anderson, black people are focused too much on civil rights and political representation while neglecting the economic foundation needed to sustain true freedom. Also in the same line, Dr. Cloud Anderson heavily criticizes integration, arguing that it did more harm than good for black communities. Before integration, black people had their own businesses, schools, institutions because they had no other choice. While segregation was unjust, it forced black communities to circulate their money within their own neighborhoods. However, after integration, black dollars quickly left black hands and flowed into white-owned businesses, weakening the economic base of black communities. Dr. Anderson also explains that black Americans must relearn the importance of group economics, supporting black-owned businesses and investing in their own communities rather than enriching others who do not have their best interest at heart. Right? Black folks don't trust each other, and this is amongst a couple of things that I've been trying to talk about and try to tell you. Also, there is something that he talks about. A central tenet of Anderson's philosophy is the importance of power. He emphasizes that power comes from wealth, not just voting or protesting. He describes power as the ability to control resources, institutions, and policies that govern people's lives. Without economic power, black people will always be at the mercy of those who control the wealth. Dr. Anderson also criticizes black leaders who focus primarily on political power without an economic foundation, arguing that political gains are easily reversed when a group lacks financial leverage. He encourages black people to strategically invest in industries that generate wealth, such as real estate, business ownership, and manufacturing. Also, education is another crucial area Dr. Anderson talks about. He believes that people must change the way they educate their children. He argues that mainstream education is designed to maintain the status quo, ensuring that black children graduate without financial literacy or entrepreneurial skills needed to build wealth. He also urges black families and communities to take education into their own hands, teaching children about business ownership, economic, and wealth building from an early age. He also warns them against relying on public school systems that often fail to prepare black children for success, and instead advocates for specialized education tailored to the needs of the black community. Dr. Cloud Anderson also goes ahead and critiques the role of consumerism in black communities. He points out that black Americans have a significant buying power, estimated at over $1 trillion, yet much of that money is spent on products and services owned by non-black businesses. Instead of building wealth, black people often engage in conspicuous consumption, buying luxury items, brand name clothing, and expensive cars while failing to invest in assets that appreciate in value. Anderson warns that as long as black people prioritize consumption over production, they will remain economically dependent on other groups. He urges black individuals to shift their focus from spending to investing in assets that generate long-term wealth. Another major issue that he also talks about is lack of intergenerational wealth transfer. Unlike other racial groups that pass down businesses, properties, and investments, many black families do not have generational wealth. to pass on. He attributes this to both historical injustices such as redlining and discriminatory banking practices and poor financial decision making within black families. And by this, he encourages black people to think long-term. Foundation. Prioritize wealth accumulation strategies that ensure future generations have a strong economic foundation. He emphasizes the importance of estate planning, property ownership, and financial literacy as tools to break the cycle of poverty. Also, Dr. Anderson speaks about political manipulation of black people, arguing that both major political parties in the US have used black votes without delivering tangible benefits. He criticizes the tendency of black people to blindly support politicians who do not prioritize their economic interest. It calls for a shift in strategy where black communities leverage their voting power to demand economic policies that directly benefits them, rather than settling for symbolic gesture or promises that go unfulfilled. He insists that black people should operate politically the way other ethnic groups do, by using their economic power to influence policy rather than relying solely on more appeals. One of the most striking aspects in Dr. Cloud Anderson's lecture is a sense of urgency. He warns that black people are running out of time to correct these issues without rapid gentrification, automation, replacing jobs, and increasing economic inequality. He believes that if black people do not act decisively, they will be permanently locked out of the economy. He highlights the importance of collective action, stating that individual success stories are not enough. If the broader black community remains impoverished, he urges black people to develop a long-term economic strategy that includes group investments, land ownership, and business developments. These are presented Jintok Stories, and I'm hoping that you are super great and super fine from wherever you're watching us from. If you liked the video, kindly let me know in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this. If you agree with Dr. Cloud Anderson, also tell me what you think about this. But until then, I'm hoping to see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.